طيب احنا last time احنا we started chapter 7 خلاص and we reached for the types of audit evidence. We explained the physical examination, confirmation, documentation, analytical procedures and we stopped there. طيب بس عشان to refresh your mind احنا قلنا ان physical examination is the countdown of the tangible assets. And we said tangible asset can include any tangible asset, not only cash, not only inventory. It can include account receivable, notes receivable, stocks, securities, whatever can be counted down will be coming under the physical examination. Okay, the physical examination. طيب يبقى actually هنا physical examination is the most persuasive but the most costly type of evidence. The most costly type of evidence. طيب. Then we move to the confirmation and we said confirmation means ان احنا we are going to get خلاص a written or oral response from an independent third party. Independent third party. Okay, who are the first and the second parties? The first party is the client, second party is the auditor, third party is anyone independent outside the company. Outside the company. Okay? طيب واحنا اتفقنا برضو ان if it is written or oral both are acceptable. But we are preferring the written one because it is documented. Okay, وقلنا ان احنا we have two types of confirmation, positive and negative. طيب, okay. And then we move to number 3, which is inspection or documentation. And we said inspection or documentation means the examination of the documents and the records. Okay, examination of documents and records. Okay, so actually here حضرتك you have to check the document whether it is internal or external. Whether it is internal or external. Internal means it has been generated from inside the company. External means generated from outside the company. Okay? طيب. And then we move to the analytical procedure. The analytical procedure is one of the most used type of evidence and substantive test. Substantive test. يعني for example, analytical procedure is checking for ratios, comparisons, and unusual items. Okay, again, ratios, comparisons, and unusual item. Type ratios like the liquidity ratio, the debt ratio, the profitability ratio, the current ratio, all kind of ratios that you studied before in Acct422. Okay, type. And in the same time, I'm going to compare to get بقى يعني a result, a valid result. I have to compare it with something else. Then I will compare it with maybe the previous year ratios, or maybe واخد بال حضرتك I will compare it with the budget that have been prepared by the company at the beginning of the year, or maybe I will compare it with the expectation of the auditor. Whatever. لكن el comparison is a must. Because the number in itself cannot describe or lead you to a valid result. Then I have to compare it with something. يبقى ratios, comparison, unusual item. Type what about unusual item? Unusual items means in حضرتك you are going to look for the unusual transactions. طيب or the unusual يبقى analytical procedure خلاص ماشي unusual items. احنا we are going to check for the unusual transaction. يعني for example مثلا company this is the first year to do a foreign currency transactions. A foreign currency transactions. Okay. طيب يبقى أنا as an auditor when I will go to the company خلاص I have to check on how did the company record this transaction to make sure إن هم they did it right in the first time أو at the first time. Because actually this is the first time for them to do a foreign currency transaction. This can be considered as unusual item. طيب maybe مثلا I will scan خلاص for transactions. Okay طيب okay فانا I will go مثلا وانا I found مثلا ان there is an entry including expenses in the credit. وانتوا as you know طبعا ان الايه النيتشر بتاع الاكسبنسز ديبت. طيب ما هو ده it has to attract my attention. طيب is it necessary to find that this transaction is incorrect؟ لا. It can be a correction of error. It can be a closing entry. It can be بس ايه it attracted my attention. يبقى انا mainly I'm looking for a unusual item, something that is unusual. Maybe it will lead me to something, maybe it will it will not. Okay. طيب يبقى this is the analytical procedure. وقلنا ان احنا we are doing the analytical procedure to understand the client's industry and business. يعني whenever حضرتك you are doing that فانت you are trying to understand the business, knowing what are the risks, what are the area that you are that going to attract your attention. فانت حضرتك you are going you are going to give more attention to that parts. ماشي. طيب assess the entity ability to continue at going concern. طبعا لو انا مثلا I calculated the debt ratio خلاص والdebt ratio اوكي خلاص بتقول لي ان الكومباني debt position is getting worse يعني بتسوء بتبقى اوحش. يبقى actually this is an indication ان الكومباني has a problem in going concern. طيب ال presence of possible misstatement. لو انا مثلا I did a profitability مثلا ratio وبعدين مثلا last year was 20% وانا I came مثلا this year I found it مثلا 60%. طبعا هنا I have to investigate, maybe there is a misstatement in the financial statement that I have to واخد بال حضرتك review it. طيب to reduce the detailed audit risk. The other part بقى اللي هم they did not attract my attention خلاص will need no further tests. no further test. فده برضه هيريديوس التايم taken in the audit وهيريديوس طبعا by default كمان الكوست. ماشي. يبقى actually those are the different purposes of the analytical procedure. Why do we do the analytical procedure? طيب number 5 بقى اللي هو inquiries of a client او inquiries of a client. طيب what do you mean by inquiry of a client؟ inquiry of a client او inquiry of a client احنا we are obtaining برضو written or oral information خلاص from the client in response to question from the from the auditor. يعني ايه؟ يعني واحد بقى مركز شويه يقول لي طب what is the difference between the inquiry of the client والconfirmation. اوكي فانا هرد عليها indent. يبقى inquiry of a client oral or written information to be acquired to be obtained from the client. خلاص. So actually this client is not a third party. So actually he is not an independent party. He is not an independent party. يبقى reliability أو persuasiveness of the inquiry of the client will be less than the confirmation because confirmation is obtained from an independent person. طيب evidence obtained from the client through an inquiry cannot be regarded as conclusive because it is not from an independent source and may be biased in the client's favor. Type. Therefore, when the auditor obtains evidence through an inquiry, it is normally necessary to obtain corroborating evidence, additional evidence through other procedures. Through other procedure. وطبعا corroborating evidence is an additional evidence to support the original one. يعني مثلا I asked for مثلا a list of all the employees working in the company. The client مثلا provided me with a list including مثلا 50 employees. I have to go to the Social Security Authority اللي هي هيئة التأمينات مثلا and I will check how many employee is registered there under the name of the company. So if I found the differences يبقى the company didn't provide me with a correct number of employees. يبقى actually هنا I have to take into consideration other corroborating evidence or other additional references in order to support the information obtained from the inquiry of the client. طيب number 6 is recalculation. Recalculation involve rechecking a sample of calculation made by the client. يعني أنا as a company I calculated مثلا depreciation cost minus salvage value over مثلا useful life. يبقى actually أنا as an auditor I will do that calculation again. I will do that إيه؟ calculation again. What calculation؟ لأن خلي بالك أنت maybe you will be confused واخد بال حضرتك after while between الريكالكوليشن والري-performance لأن هما they are concurrently done with each other. يعني إيه؟ يعني مثلا الإكزامبل of depreciation اللي أنا I was just talking about الdepreciation cost minus salvage over useful life. Whenever I'm reviewing the numbers this is recalculation اللي هو الcost minus salvage equal كذا. This is recalculation. لكن in the same time I'm reviewing خلاص the re-performance which means I'm making sure that this is the right equation to be used for the straight line method. Okay يبقى هنا خلاص I have to take into consideration ايه ان some of the evidence are to be used concurrently. فيبقى re-performance I'm redoing the procedure once again and recalculation means ان انا while I'm doing re-performance انا am recalculating the numbers. recalculating the numbers. Okay يبقى recalculation بتتكلم على rechecking of a sample of calculation. We are talking about arithmetical accuracy. Arithmetical accuracy means numbers. Okay طيب testing the client's arithmetical accuracy and includes such a procedure as extending sales invoices and inventory, adding journal and subsidiary records. يعني ايه؟ يعني مفيش مانع ان انا اجيب invoice واعمل re-multiplying مثلا للنمبر اوف يونتس في السيلينج برايس. اوكي؟ مفيش مانع ان انا اروح جورنال واعمل calculation او addition او summation مره ثانيه. كل ده can be considered as re-calculation. طيب considerable portion of the auditor's recalculation is done by computer assisted audit ايه software. والكلام ده احنا we can do it by software. okay can do it by ايه software. طيب a considerable portion of auditor's recalculation is done by computer. okay طيب re-performance بقى re-performance is the auditor's okay independent test of the client's accounting procedures or controls that were originally done as part of the entry accounting and internal control system. طيب احنا we got one example related to depreciation and we said ان احنا whenever we are reviewing the depreciation method فاحنا actually here we are doing re-performance. بس is it always about number؟ يعني re-performance is always about number؟ لا recalculation is the one that is always about numbers about calculations. لكن if you are talking about the re-performance فالre-performance can be for non-numerical procedures. يعني مثلا for the internal control in order for a student مثلا to join a class فهو he has to go to مثلا the bank and paying the fees. This is step number one. He will get a receipt. That receipt he will go to the accounting department مثلا to register that receipt. And then he will go online. And then he will make a registration online. وبعدين he will come again to the faculty in order to get a printed and signed schedule. يبقى actually those are procedures. If I'm going to do re-performance I have to make sure that the process is going that way. خلاص rechecking for the performance or for the doing of that procedures. The same to be applied inside the company مثلا. In order to buy or to purchase مثلا inventory there are a procedures to be followed in order to reach for the inventory. فيبقى actually هنا احنا we have to review if that procedures are to be applied. This is re-performance. This is re-performance. طيب يبقى where is recalculation involve rechecking a computation. Re-performance involve checking other procedures. طيب for example the auditor may compare the price on an invoice to an approved price list. to make sure in the prices included in the invoices are according to the list issued by the company. طيب or may re-perform aging of account receivable. If you remember the allowance for doubtful account, it was calculated. We have two ways to do it: aging of receivable or percentage of net sales. So if I'm going to check if the company applied the aging of receivable correctly, this is خلاص what I'm calling re-performance. Okay, طيب aging of receivable or to recheck transfer of information by tracing information included in more than one place to verify it is recorded at the same amount each time. خلاص if we are transferring مثلا from ال T account to from الجورنال to T account اللي هو البوستنج مثلا، فيبقى انا I have to make sure ان ال process of posting and summarization, and this is one of the related audit objective, related audit transaction related audit objectives that we studied in chapter 6. Okay, طيب يبقى re-performance is about redoing the things again, quantitative or non-quantitative. Number 8 and the last one, and because it is the last one, you have to bear in mind in this is the least persuasive and the least or the one with the lowest cost. خلاص فبقول كده we are using the senses of the clients خلاص to observe. طيب observation ده maybe a tour in a client مثلا premises. I will make a tour in the client premises. خلاص I will make some observation regarding خلاص other issues or events that happen inside the company. يعني مثلا I would like to make sure in whoever going to the university cannot go inside the campus unless he has an ID. فأنا I will go stand in front of the gate and I will see if anyone will go through the gates without his ID. يبقى this is an observation. I didn't do anything. I just used my senses, my eye. خلاص my eyes, my ears to hear or واخد بال حضرتك to see what is going on خلاص and collect the information by that way. طبعا this is the least persuasive as we said. We cannot document it very well, so actually here we have to take into consideration other additional evidence to support your to support this type of evidence. يبقى احنا we reach it for the appropriateness of the type of evidence. فاحنا بنقول كده هنا بقى he is illustrating each type of evidence. كويس الكلام؟ each type of evidence خلاص and what are the criteria to determine the appropriateness of that evidence او reliability of that evidence. طيب اوكي ماشي. وهنا طبعا السامبل سايز بيقول يعني في الاوبزرفيشن خلاص all count teams بالنسبه للايتم to select not applicable. التايمنج بيبقى البالانس شيت ديت usually يعني. في الفيزيكال اكزامينيشن بنكاونت a sample of inventory and compare it خلاص to the description and the quantities in the client's accounts. مثلا sample size 120 طبعا هنا all of that are as يعني assumptions خلاص ماشي. طيب الايتم to select مثلا 40 item with large dollar value but 80 randomly. الديت مثلا اللي هو البالانس شيت ديت. طبعا هنا هو he is linking التايب اوف evidence with الفور evident decision اللي احنا we covered at the beginning of the chapter اللي هو to decide the audit procedure, the sample size, how to select, and then the timing of applying the audit procedures. Okay? طيب. بعد كده he gave you some terms and some type of evidence. يعني مثلا usually whenever you find examine فانا I mean ان احنا we are doing inspection or documentation. طيب whenever we are doing scan فانا I'm talking about analytical procedure. Whenever I'm talking about read مثلا inspection, compute, analytical procedure. طب one of you will ask me why it is not recalculation لان هو مش بيقول recompute هو بيقول compute. اوكي طيب foot recalculation. طبعا food ده اللي هو ايه adding الديبت والكريدت sides of the مثلا specific T account and find out the balance. طيب trace inspection او re-performance, compare inspection مثلا, count physical examination, observe observation, inquire يبقى inquiry, vouch خلاص which is vouches to see the vouchers يعني خلاص, inspection and so on. يبقى those are the key terms that you may find خلاص and will lead you to the type of evidence according to the cases that you are going to solve مع لميس ان شاء الله. طيب any question؟
معلش يا دكتور ممكن
احنا we are going to move for the last part of the chapter which is audit documentation. طيب what do you mean by audit documentation؟ احنا قلنا documentation are documents. طيب from the point of view of the auditor بقى the auditor must document all the audit procedures to be done by the auditor within the audit process. يعني every audit procedure, every sample, all the information to be collected, all the types of evidence خلاص must be documented. Must be documented. Why it must be documented? Because actually it must واخد بال حضرتك be reviewed by other after the auditor okay will finish his audit. فالdocumentation هنا is from the point of view of the auditor, not from the point of view of the client. فالاudit documentation is the principal record of auditing procedures applied, evidence obtained, conclusions reached by the auditor in the engagement. In the engagement. الengagement اللي هو الاudit that you accepted to do. Okay? يبقى الdocumentation تاني principal record of all the auditing procedures applied, all the evidence obtained, and conclusion reached by the auditor in the engagement. طيب, very good. What is the main purpose of audit documentation? Why the auditor should keep record of all the documentation of all the audit procedures that have been done? طيب, فبنقول كده the overall objective of the audit is to aid the auditor in providing reasonable assurance that an adequate audit was conducted in accordance with auditing standards. يعني ده will prove ان the auditor had followed the auditing standard in doing the audit. طيب, let's go بقى for other. يبقى this is the main purpose. This is the main objective. طيب, what are other purposes that to be taken into consideration خلاص when you are talking about the documentation of audit? Okay. طيب, يبقى actually the first purpose is it will be used as a basis for planning of the audit. Basis for the planning of the audit. So actually here, if you are auditing the company for more than 1 year, this can be considered as a base for auditing for auditing the new year financial statement. ثواني يا اولاد معلش. If we are doing an audit for a company خلاص in a regular way يعني كل سنة احنا we are doing the audit, فانت you can use this documentation of the previous year to plan for the audit of the current year. لأن last year حضرتك you knew everything about the company, you collected information about the company, فأنت you can use this information in order to decide مثلا what are the most appropriate audit procedure, what are the most appropriate مثلا sample size, what are the most appropriate time of applying and so on. يبقى هنا خلاص احنا we can use it as a basis for planning the audit. Okay. طيب, كمان I can use it as a record of the evidence accumulated and the result of the test of audit. يعني whatever test you have done, okay, خلاص you can accumulate in the documentation and at the same time واخد بال حضرتك it will be there in order to find out واخد بالك الريزلت اللي انت حضرتك you reached. طب جميل. In order كمان to find out the appropriate type of audit report. ما انت based on the tests that have been done and the result that you reached فحضرتك you will take a decision for which audit report should be issued. اوكي يبقى actually الدوكيومنتيشن ده will help me to واخد بال حضرتك decide on the appropriate type of audit. طيب a basis for review by supervisors and partners. طيب وده بقى is related more to the real life. ليه؟ لأن حضرتك when a team لما يكون في team واخد بال حضرتك you are working with وبتaudit الكومباني فاكشولي التيم دوت خلاص did work. طيب how to make sure ان التيم ده had made the right work و how to make sure ان التيم دوت reached for واخد بالك the appropriate audit report. لازم one of the partners to review والبارتنر ده اللي هو الهايست يعني rank in the audit firm. خلاص one of the partners must review the work that have been done by the audit team to decide if the audit report that have been selected is correct or not. Okay? يبقى خلي بالك احنا we said ان احنا we use it as a base for planning. اساس ان احنا نعمل عليه الاوديت اللي جاي. Record of evidence accumulated and results. هيدوكيومنت all the collected evidence. 3 to find out the appropriate type of audit report. 4 for review by supervisor. ليه بقى؟ السوبرفايزر didn't go for the company with the team. ما راحش للشركه مع التيم بس he has to to review in order to make sure ان everything have been done correctly. Okay يبقى those are the main reasons or purposes for the audit documentation. طيب جميل. Who is owning these documents؟ يعني انت as an auditor انت you went to the company you accumulated information, you made a documentation, you made واخد بال حضرتك a file. Who is owning this file? Actually, the ownership of the file is toward the auditor. خدت بالك ازاي؟ toward the auditor. تمام؟ طيب يبقى actually هنا واخد بال حضرتك the ownership of the audit files is for the auditor. Audit documentation prepared during the engagement, including a schedule prepared by the client for the auditor, is the property of the auditor. وخلي بالك, even though in the information taken out of the company has no right at all to ask for that file. خلاص? The client or the company has no right at all to find out to ask for seeing that document. And the only time anyone else, including the client, has a legal right to examine files is when they are subpoenaed by the court as legal evidence. يعني the only time anyone else can see that file whenever we are in a dispute with the client مثلا فساعتها الكورت will ask to see the file وساعتها دي الحالة الوحيدة اللي أنا I can see the file again in the court. طيب at the completion of the engagement audit file are retained on the CPA's premises for future reference and to comply with auditing standard related to the document retention. خلاص. What is the document retention؟ اللي هو period that we are going to keep the file for. طيب ماشي ودي احنا we are going to talk about it later. The retention of the audit documentation. Auditing standard requires that records for the audit of private company be retained for minimum of 5 years. 5 years. طيب the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in the US require auditors of public company to prepare and maintain audit working paper for a period no less than 7 years. يبقى في أمريكا البرايفت is 5, البابليك is 7 years. طيب the destruction of documents and indictment of Arthur Andersen and Enron fraud case showed the importance of practice of archiving and retaining the audit documentation. هو هنا بيتكلم ان الكيس بتاعت انرن اللي هي حصل فيها فرود وكونسبيرسي ما بين المانجمنت والاوديتور، ان هم زي destroyed the documents. فبيقول لك من هنا بقى ظهرت اهميه ان يبقى فيه legal requirement ان انت to keep او to archive اوكي الايه الدوكيومنتيشن او الدوكيومنت اللي انت collected from the ايه from the client. طيب the last part which is the confidentiality of audit file. The confidentiality of audit file. The need to maintain a confidential relation with the client is expressed in the Code of Professional Conduct. يعني ال Code of Professional Conduct actually is asking me to keep all the information taken from the clients confidential, because whenever you are auditing, you are getting information about the revenue sources. You are getting information about مثلا the compensation plan of the employees and the management. You are getting information about the marketing plans of the company. You are getting information about the taxes to be paid by the company. You are getting information about everything. So actually all this information will be considered as confidential. خلاص? And we cannot disclose it except with the consent of the client. يعني لو ال client is asked me، وطبعا الاسك ده لازم او الريكوست ده it must be written in order to be documented. خلاص؟ فاحنا هنا I can express this information based on the consent of the client. طيب during the audit, auditor obtained a considerable amount of information of confidential nature, including officers' salary, product pricing, advertising plan, product cost. If the auditor transferred this information to outsider or to the clients, employee who have been denied access, the relation with the manager would be seriously strained. يبقى ال confidentiality is one of the main requirement of of how to organize the audit documentation. طيب, the organized audit documentation will include mainly two main files, something we call the permanent files and the current files. طيب, what will be included in the permanent file and what will be included in the current file? The permanent file has information خلاص of a historical or continuing nature, يعني something that will be kept in the file خلاص for a long period of time. يعني مثلا contract of the company, contract of the company, okay, buy chart او buy law of the company, okay, internal مثلا control manual, مثلا minutes of the board of the meeting خلاص meetings of board. يبقى كل permanent files should be included in a permanent files. The files that will continue in the future and actually it had been collected in the past. Right. What are the types of information to be included? Maybe extract or copies of a company document of continuing importance زي الارticle of incorporation اللي هو عقد التأسيس، الباي لوز اللي هو اللائحة الداخلية، bond indentures and contracts اللي هي التفاصيل of البونز مثلا لو الكومباني بتيشو بوند، اوكي، analysis from previous years، analysis from previous years، okay, of accounts important to to auditor. طيب, information related to understanding of the internal control and assessing control risk, as we said, result of analytical procedure. وهي from here بقى coming الكومباريزن اللي احنا we used to talk to talk about. لان احنا قلنا احنا we are doing ratios and then to compare it. فقلنا with the last year خلاص مثلا figures with the budgeted numbers with a lot of things. لكن if I would like to compare it with the previous year results then actually I have to get it from the permanent file. يبقى ال permanent file the historical file including information that have been collected and actually it is important to keep it with me in the future. Okay, طيب, very good. The other type of files is the current files. The current files include all audit documentation applicable to the year under audit. يعني this is the information that you are going to collect within the current year. Within the current year. طيب, what are the information to be included? The audit program that you have designed that year. General information about the company. The working trial balance. This is what I was telling you, واخد بال حضرتك a while ago. اللي هو ايه؟ لما انا قلت ان احنا in real life احنا we are asking for a trial balance, okay, for the company and start to review from the trial balance. طيب, adjusting and reclassification entry. Any adjustment that have been made by the company, it must be included in the current year. Supporting schedule, whatever the schedules will be. طيب, each audit file should be properly identified. Documentation should be indexed and cross-referenced and archived in a good way. So whenever we are in need for that information, I can go and retrieve it in an easy way. خلاص؟ طيب. The complete documentation must clearly indicate the audit work done. يعني what have been done during the audit. طيب, and it should include sufficient information, and it should plainly state the conclusion reached, which is the type of the audit of the audit report. Okay. طبعا, can we use technology in that? Yes, طبعا, of course. الالكترونيك بقى فورم زي مثلا الاكسل شيتس. خلاص. الالكترونيك information to be collected مثلا من الويب سايت بتاع الكومباني using computers to read and examine, واخد بالك, evidence to select items to be selected can be selected automatically. Maybe to decide on the size of the sample. خلاص. So actually the technology here can be used everywhere. The technology can be used everywhere. يبقى again بقى to sum up يعني, فاحنا we have in the organized audit documentation we have permanent file. This is files with historical nature, have been collected خلاص in the past, but it will continue with us in the future. And the current file is including files to be or information related to the current year. Okay. Fine. And it must be sufficient. It must be well organized, archived, indexed in order to be including sufficient information. And it will include also كمان the conclusion reached by the audit team. It can be done through technology. Yes, technology can do everything now. Right. Very good. By that, we end the chapter 7. خلاص. Next time, inshallah, we are going to start a new chapter.